Are we here? Are we there yet? Let me just scoot this back a little, being very careful for anyone who remembers my last attempt at this. Yeah, thankfully, everything camera-wise seems to be working okay today. So I'm going to set this down. I'm going to make sure that I'm actually live, and I'm going to bring up comments here. And once I see people start trickling in, oops, I gotta turn the sound down because Fuego's a dumb boy. Skip ad. Oh, wow, it's really creepy just looking at yourself as this is going on. All right, we have some people trickling through. So I am going to start this official, y'all. All right, here we go. My notebook. And let's get rocking. All right. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for the monthly live edition of to Stephen King. That's right, guys. I brought out the Michael Buffer shizzle right there. What is up, everybody? So this is my first time doing a live Hail to Stephen King since the debacle that was the Stephen King Oscars. And yeah, anyone who was watching that saw there was a falling camera, all kinds of craziness. It was pretty no bueno, unfortunately, but everything is seemingly fixed. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And yes, there is a very special thing that we are here to describe. It's actually two special things. So here at the beginning of April, I commenced my first ever Stephen King book club here on Hail to Stephen King, where one of the first episodes of the month, I did it the first Saturday of the month here for April, but I might change it. It's because I do this show every Tuesday and every Saturday. So basically at the beginning of the month on one of the two episodes, I am going to let you guys know what the book of the month is and encourage all of you to read it along with me. And then the final episode of the month is where we are going to go live and discuss it. And hopefully some of you were along for the ride, or hopefully you're just big fans of the book Christine, which here in the month of April celebrates its 35th anniversary. Woo! Awesomeness. You know, I really like the book, don't really like the movie. Now, the funny thing is also, this marks the 35th anniversary of Christine the movie as well. So let's flash forward back to 1983. And I'm going to pull back the curtain because that's the year I was born. Stephen King was probably at the height of his popularity, definitely rivaling as popular as he is right now with so many films that just came out last year, so much in development for later this year and for next year and whatnot, from It Chapter 2 to, I mean, this summer we have Castle Rock coming. Next year they're supposed to be doing the new Tommy Knockers. They just announced The Long Walk, which is amazing. But, you know, as popular as King is, you know, has reemerged to become in the last year or so. Honestly, 1983, in my opinion, was where he really became the King, El Rey, Sai King, as we all know and love him, because in 1983, he had 3 books come out and he had 3 movies come out. So I think that's where he had kind of hit his plateau of sorts, at least as far as popularity. He had Pet Sematary come out that year, he had Christine come out that year, and he had Cycle of the Werewolf come out that year. And then as far as films go that year, he also had Cujo come out. He had, obviously, Christine came out later that year, and I feel like a total bozo because the third film he had come out that year is totally eluding me, but I know there was a third film. Derps, I should have probably written that down. But nonetheless, here we are 35 years later, and we are going to talk first and foremost about the book, and I'm going to be just going just part by part because Christine, the book, is basically broken into 3 different parts, and I'm just going to give some thoughts on all of them, and afterwards, we're going to do a little comparison and talk about the film. So I'm going to just jump on and see who of the 13 we have in chat. So I've got Sam Power. I've got the Reader in Black, which is awesome. I'm thinking the Man in Black, and that is just pretty dope. Mark Pearson, my UK buddy. How the hell are you, man? I'm doing great. Sam Power saying hi to Mark. All right. I read Pet Sematary the week I was pet sitting a cat that looks exactly like Church. That, the Reader in Black, is hella creepy, I must say. Okay, Scuba Steve Films. Scuba Steve, what is up, my dude? Rob, Rubber Soul, my man. How the hell are you, homie? I see people fraternizing with each other and so on and so forth. Dino Mike, what is up, good sir? What does Rob got to say here? The first Stephen King book I read was Christine. Did a book report on it in 5th grade and got a letter sent home. The adults weren't happy. Yeah, we weren't allowed to read Stephen King or Goosebumps or any of that stuff, Lovecraft. And, I was lucky to get away with Poe and being able to do a reading of The Raven when I was in like 6th grade. But okay, as I look, I see Boltrana Geek. What's up? All I'm seeing is Brazil there. Angela, yes, read all of them. Hola, what's going on? All right. Mark Pearson says, I read Christine years ago, but didn't get to round it this time. Well, that's cool because I'm basically going to give my thoughts on Christine. And so just to get into it, I saw Christine the movie when I was younger, and I didn't like it. I thought the idea of a living car was pretty stoops. Just wasn't into it. And the fact that, as a youngster, I was so hungry for gore and death and craziness. And really, despite it being an R-rated film, and I didn't see it, with the cussing or anything in it. And apparently, as I was watching some of the supplemental features on the DVD, the special edition that they put out years ago, that's got some really good interviews with Carpenter and with the cast and so on and so forth. But yeah, I guess there was a lot of controversy because the kids were talking, dropping F-bombs and all this craziness and whatnot. But nonetheless, it's not a violent movie, especially by Carpenter standards, because the movie he had done previous to this was The Thing, and how gory and crazy, insane was that? So, that was him just kind of deciding to make a mainstream movie. The dude needed work, and he had wanted to make a Stephen King film for a while, and so that the horror master did. But as a kid, I saw Christine, and I did not like it. I thought it was boring and lame, and so on and so forth, like I told you guys. But when I decided about 7, almost 8 years ago to begin my King journey after I read it, after I read Pet Sematary and The Stand, and then I realized The Flag pops up in other books besides The Stand, that's when I was like, okay, damn, I definitely need to start reading all the King books in order. And when I came to Christine, I read it, and I enjoyed it, but I think I steamrolled through it so quickly because I was just that anxious to get to Dark Tower stuff, that I didn't give it the proper level of appreciation like I think I should have. And so rereading Christine this past month, and I divided my time between the audiobook when I was just jumping around here doing work at home and stuff like that. If you're washing the dishes, if you're doing the laundry, if you're mowing the lawn, whatever, it's not like you're going to walk around with a book like this the whole time. That's impossible. So in a lot of my rereads of some of these books, I like to have the audio on hand so that, when I don't have the time to sit down and read, that's usually at the end of the night after, I've done the Twitters and the YouTubes and editing and all the other stuff, that's when I'll sit down and read, but it helps me speed through a book a lot quicker. The audiobook is pretty damn good of Christine. And so upon the reread, I gained a much bigger appreciation for Christine because it's honestly really at the heart of it. And they got some of these themes across decently in the movie, but the movie this book is over 500 pages long, guys. Seriously. Yeah. Over 500. And for that reason, it's just I don't know. It's so tough to condense over 520 pages into a 100-minute movie. Does that sound feasible to any of you? No, that is supremely difficult, man. And so, the book at its core, though, is really a story about growing up, about friends just kind of losing touch with one another and losing their care, and just it's about loss and acceptance and just the loss of innocence and adolescence and friends drifting apart. Kind of is for me what this and how as we grow older and as we mature we reprioritize. Sometimes the friend that we were so close with and spent so much time with, someone steps in, whether it's a significant other. In Arnie's place it was a car, and so I must say I appreciated this book a whole lot more because it has those similar themes that we get in something like Stand By Me, or later on in a book like Joyland, actually, which I can draw a lot of comparisons in some ways to this. And even Stephen King's It. These are familiar, resounding themes that King is really big into. And I love when King writes younger characters. I really do. I had an ex-girlfriend who really gave me a lot of shite about just enjoying these stories where it's the coming of age stories basically, and she gave me so much crap about it. And was like, you like all those, teen movies and stuff like that, and your Sandy things and your Can't Hardly Waits and your Dazed and Confused and things like that. But I love those kind of movies, I really do. Even something like Almost Famous, anything that's about somebody maturing at a younger age and just really crossing that bridge and stuff. It's compelling stuff, man. And so yeah, for Christine, it's basically and interestingly broken into 3 different parts. So you've got Teenage Car Songs, which is part 1. You've got Teenage Love Songs, which is part 2. And then you've got Teenage Death Songs, I believe, which is part 3. Yeah. And so it's interesting because it's told from 2 different perspectives. So the first part is told by Arnie's best friend, this guy Dennis, who is like, Dennis is the jock. He's like kind of the popular football player, you know, dating the cheerleader and all that other stuff. But his best friend growing up is this dude named Arnie, and Arnie is super nerd status, and everybody picks on him. And you know, he's got the big nerd glasses, the Buddy Holly glasses going on presumably. And interestingly enough, this takes place in 1978, despite coming out in 1983. So King did do kind of a pseudo flashback. I mean, it wasn't like super flashback, being only 5 years that he jumped back, but I feel like it's a story that has aged well because of the period aspect to it. And so yeah, all of a sudden, you know, one day after they're getting done with their summer job, Arnie and Dennis are driving down, and Arnie just sets his eyes on this Plymouth Fury, it's either 57 or 58 Plymouth Fury, and he's immediately entranced and just in love, and he goes and talks to this crazy old guy named LeBay, I believe his name is, or yes, LeBay. I just wanted to make sure I'm not effing it up. And yeah, he ends up getting kind of swindled for this like hunk of junk, you know. And so he buys the vehicle, and he just slowly, if you're familiar with this story at all, he just slowly gets more and more entrenched in it. And it feels like everybody is against him having this vehicle, you know? And so, you know, the parents are against it, and, you know, his best friend Dennis is trying to talk him out of purchasing it and everything. And so it's the first third of the story just basically shows the sowing of the seeds, you know? And yeah, he fixes it up. He's got it at this garage, Darnell's garage, and, you know, he kind of runs afoul of this bully named Buddy, who is hilariously portrayed, in my opinion, in the film. You know, this dude looks like a wannabe John Travolta, you know, kind of guy, but more on the greaser side of things and less on the Saturday Night Fever side of things. But yeah, so he pisses these guys off, gets them expelled from school, and that's really one of the things that also sows the seeds for conflict that happens later on in the book. But, you know, that's the thing. Even once, you know, Christine starts killing people and stuff in the second part, Teenage Love Songs, it's really at the core of it. It's about just the breaking down of this friendship. You know, these 2 best friends, you know, Arnie and Dennis, and that's what I can really, really identify a hell of a lot with, because I mean, seriously, I had a best friend that I knew from birth. You know, our moms went to college together. We were born 3 weeks apart. We were best friends for like over 2 decades, 2.5, almost 3 decades, and then, you know, just the slow drifting apart of, you know, just, you know, I get involved in a band and, you know, less time and more time with the horror show. And, you know, you all know, as we get older, getting schedules to synchronize with friends gets tougher and tougher and tougher. The more responsibilities you have, if you have kids, if you have a wife or a significant other or whatever it may be, I mean, it gets tougher and tougher. And that's, once again, it's at the core of this story, is the disillusion of the friendship. And the first part, I should say, the first third of this story basically ends with Dennis getting this crazy injury and hurting the hell out of himself. You know, his skull gets cracked, he breaks a couple legs and arms, and he's knocked the hell out, man. And he wakes up like a couple days later in the hospital. And the interesting thing is, when we transition into the second part of the story, which is the Teenage Love Songs, it's not told from Dennis's perspective anymore because of the fact that he's just stuck in the hospital for months. And so that's when the story goes to a third-person narrator, and it jumps around. And it's basically like this, you know, otherworldly presence is just observing all kinds of different things happen, from Arnie beginning to date Lee, this chick who is a transfer student that everybody has fawned over, including Dennis. And yeah, it jokes to you know, Buddy and his gang wanting to go trash Christine and all this other stuff. And so yeah, it's just interesting how when Dennis, our main narrator in the first third of the story, you know, he can't go from place to place anymore. The perspective shifts, and so I think it's pretty rad. Let's see, anybody who has read this story, I'm going to see if anyone is chiming in with any thoughts here. Super Tenor is here. What up? What up? Stephen G. Atkins, greetings, good sir. Reader in Black says, I'm reading The Stand, and I know this will be in one of my top 3 books. Yep, just a little conversing amongst yourselves. I'm ashamed to admit, Christine is one of only a few SK books I haven't read. I skipped Christine, Firestarter, and Cujo. I saw those films around the same time. Well, yeah, because all those books are written about the same time, and all three of those films came out about the same time, too. I can't say those three are three of my absolute favorite King novels. I don't even know if any of them would land in the top 10, to be dead honest. But like I said, I enjoyed the book Christine, and we'll get to the film here in just a little bit, guys. Doing fairly well. Okay, yep, Rob is okay. Rob says Christine is definitely not one of my favorites. Should have read it again for this. I might still. It's definitely worth the reread, man. But Rob, it's larger than I remember. Whereas some of the shorter King books, they're in the 300 to 400 range. Like I said, this is 520 something pages, I think. So, but it was a breezy read, honestly, and yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of it. So 58 in the book. Okay, yeah, Mark is correcting me there. And Angela says, Buddy Repperton, total evil. Yeah, Buddy is evil as hell in this. And, I think that that was one of the detriments of the film is that they didn't, he was more hammy and goofy and not quite as sinister in the movie for me. Not that the actor totally trashed it or anything, but okay, Angela also says the relationship between Arnie and Christine was almost sensual, right? Creepy stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, in the book, there is a scene where he has like this nightmare of like marrying Christine, and the corpse of LeBay is like there's a witness, or like it's crazy, man. And so yeah, this is a book that it's a slow build. It really is, because in a lot of ways it is, once again, it's about disillusion of friendship, and it's a drama to that degree that sprinkles in the horror eventually. But it's a slow burn. It really, really definitely is. Autoerotica at its finest, says Robert Soul. I totally agree. Teenage love song. So another cool thing that King does with this book is before every single chapter, he has a quote from a different musical artist, and it's all like usually, well, it's all pertaining pretty much to something about driving. So we get songs from Bo Diddley, we get songs from Chuck Berry, we get songs from Beach Boys. I mean, how many damn Beach Boys songs, were about My Little Deuce Coupe and all this other stuff, and tons of Chuck Berry stuff was about driving around in my automobile and all that. So my baby beside me at the wheel. And that's another cool thing, that as you start to realize that there's a presence within Christine, like, it's funny because in the book, Arnie is like not remembering driving around at times, and like the speedometer, or excuse me, not the speedometer, is it the odometer? I think I'm not a car guy, unfortunately, but you see like the amount of miles driven. I think that's the odometer. It's going backwards, which is crazy, and it's not accurate either. So it's not going mile by mile. It'll like speed up sometimes and slow down, and the radio always plays nothing but those 50s and 60s like cruising like old rock and roll type songs. And it goes so far as to one point where it's playing old like 50s like news, like a news interlude break, and you're hearing about all kinds of events that were going on in the late 50s. And Arnie, I think, is driving around and he hears this, and like he's still kind of with himself at that point, and he trips out a little bit. It's crazy, but I love those headings, and that was one thing that the audiobook does not do, which kind of pissed me off. Is when I was going back when I would be doing stuff around the house or cruising in my truck ski, my vehicular, and listening to Christine coming back from work and stuff like that, and I would just be like, why didn't they have the heading? And then I come home and I look and I'm like, oh, because they weren't reading them for the audiobook. So I had to always go back and see what the song quote was at the beginning, because there's some really good ones. I mean, there's some great stuff from there's some good Springsteen ones in here. I mean, the Last Kiss song that about the car accident and stuff that Pearl Jam covered. I still prefer the original, but Ed Ved did a decent job. But so yeah, Teenage Love Songs, the second part where it shifts to that third person narrative. I mean, yeah, this is where Arnie basically just keeps fighting with his mother and his father, and they move Christine to the airport to store it there, because once he gets it all fixed up, of course he wants that shizzle at his house. And his mom is like, his parents are these two snooty like college professors basically, and his mom is kind of a drunk, and she's very used to getting her way. And Arnie was such a subservient little droog to her all growing up that this sudden onset of rebellion just scares the living hell out of her. And so fortunately, or unfortunately, I should say, for Arnie, it's storing Christine at the airport to really S everything up, man, because when that transpires is where one of Buddy's buddies sees that it's there, and that really is a big turning point, because if you've seen the film, Christine gets smashed the hell up by Buddy and his gang, and it's just I don't know. It's interesting to see Lee and Arnie's love blossom, but you can tell that he's much more affectionate and just he's much more enamored with the car than with the girl that everybody else wants, and it's just I don't know. He's Dennis once again is holed up in the hospital, and we really hear very little from him except for like when Arnie comes and visits him on Thanksgiving, and that's about it, and that's one of like the last little shimmers of their friendship that we get to see, where he brings in a 6-pack of beer and Thanksgiving leftover turkey sandwiches, but he can see that his friend is changing. And one thing that they do in the book that they do not do in the film basically implies that Christine was evil from the beginning and all this other stuff. But the thing that the book does differently is that LeBay, the crazy old crotchety asshole who sells Arnie this vehicle, they imply, well, they don't just imply, they flat out show that LeBay has kind of, his evil spirit is almost like taken over Arnie, basically, almost like straight up possession type shizzle here. And so his spirit kind of goes back and forth between taking Arnie over and taking the car over, because if you've seen the film, eventually Christine starts driving around on her own and killing fools and stuff like that. And there's this detective that starts investigating things. And I mean, yeah, Buddy and his crew goes nuts and they trash that vehicle at the airport. But this is where we start to see that the car can repair itself. And I mean, it tries to kill Lee at one point. She's choking on a burger, and this other guy has to go and help because Arnie is like shell shocked, and like he tries like hitting her over the back instead of giving her the Heimlich. It's really weird, man. And Arnie has the police on his ass, and he's starting to just forget even how the vehicle is repairing itself, and how all of these things, like more and more of his memory, he keeps having lapses. He keeps having these like zone out times where he'll go cruising and he doesn't know what the hell he did. And this is presumably where LeBay is just taking his ass over and just using his shell for whatever the hell he wants. And usually for menace. And I mean, slowly he just goes through, Buddy and all of those guys running them down. And it's very graphically described in the books, just some of the car chases and everything. And one thing that they do change in the film, they change the setting from Pennsylvania to California. So some of these chilly, snow-drenched sites where Christine is like chasing these guys down and running them over and all this stuff, we don't get any of that because of the fact that they filmed in California instead. So that's actually one of my bigger disappointments about this, is that they decided to change the setting. But, Hollywood is in California, obviously, so that makes sense. But, yeah, LeBay's dead spirit is like stunk up the vehicle. And there's even times where like Arnie's dad is in the car or Lee is in the car and they think it smells like something is dead in there. I'm honestly, when I was rewatching the movie last night, I don't think that there was an instance when anybody said that. I just rewatched the film last night. Still can't say I'm particularly fond of it, but that dream marriage sequence that I mentioned earlier where Arnie's marrying Christine is weird as hell, man. And then eventually some dumb stuff that Arnie is doing, and this is a subplot that's not in the film either. Arnie, for that Darnell dude where he's storing his stuff, he's basically doing runs to like New York and stuff of like cigarettes and booze and, just all kinds of stuff. He's basically doing small-time smuggling for him. And that's how this officer who's been on Arnie trying to peg him for these crimes that they somehow can't pinpoint, including like they find chips of red paint in one of Buddy's dead buddies' bodies. Say that 10 times fast, huh? And but yet there's not a scratch on Christine, looking immaculate constantly. And so these cops and eventually federal agents, they are really wanting to pop off Christine and Arnie because they're positive that in correlation they're guilty for these murders, but they end up having to nail him for this small-time smuggling instead. And so, I mean, it's interesting how that goes down near the end of Teenage Love Songs, I believe it is. The second part of this book. And so, I mean, at the end of this, you really see Christine is at her vilest, and she runs down Darnell, and so she's basically killed just about everybody in conjunction that has messed with her or kind of knows her secret, because Darnell sees her driving herself around, and I guess that doomed his ass, unfortunately. And the scene with him getting killed is so much better in the book, but it would have been so much higher of a budget to do it, because in the film, like, the seat like pushes forward or something, stoops, and in the book, like, Christine literally like drives into his house and like tears flipping walls down and all this insanity. And so, yeah, I gotta say that the second half of the book is where it really starts roaring. And yet it's interesting because this is where, we see pretty much nothing from Dennis except for that Thanksgiving visit that I mentioned. And so, yeah, when we rejoin for the third part, Teenage Death Songs, we go back to the perspective of Arnie, which is interesting. But I'm going to see what everybody has to say in the comments just real quick. Okay. Okay. Everybody's just listening in at this point. Okay, nothing else to say. So let's jump into Teenage Death Songs then, the third and final part of this. And, it's interesting because we get even more backstory about LeBay himself in this and how he could potentially just have the art of taking somebody over and whatnot. Arnie has a conversation early in the book after LeBay dies, and LeBay dies shortly after selling the Plymouth to Arnie. So Arnie and Dennis go to the funeral, and Dennis talks to LeBay's brother. And, he has this lengthy discussion with him about just how nutty his brother was. But after Christine is going crazy and killing everybody, basically, when Dennis gets out of the hospital, he very foolishly starts a loving relationship. He basically, even though Arnie and Lee had already broken up, he still was the friend that decided to step in. And, love triangles with best friends, man. Two best friends fighting over a chick. That's ugly stuff. Unfortunately, I kind of know from personal experience in my adolescence. But that's another story which I have no interest in talking about. But yeah, nonetheless, man, it's like he moves in on his best friend's, ex. And they're very worried about Arnie. And the concern is genuine. But the fact that they're kind of sneaking around as this romance is blossoming, and the fact that they're embarrassed and they're kind of ashamed, but yet the fact that it's a secret almost excites them and stuff. It's really, I kind of had a little bit of a problem with it, but hey, kids will be kids, right? we all do dumb stuff, when we're thinking with our pants instead or whatever. But nonetheless, Dennis, as he is doing this investigation, he gives LeBay's brother a call again, and this is where he finds out LeBay was presumably, according to their mother, a changeling, that there was one particular time when he was very, very young when she was positive something happened and he was switched with some little evil demon fudger or whatever. And from then on out, it was like he just became more and more volatile and more evil as the years went on. And Christine was responsible for the deaths of LeBay's daughter. And then eventually his wife committed suicide in the vehicle from, the carbon monoxide, whatever, where you lock yourself in the vehicle and you just let the engine run and all that stuff. And so, Christine already had blood on her tires, before, or on her seats or whatever the hell you want to say, long before she started mowing down Buddy and all these other people. And so just the fact that there was a history, just the fact that they go so much more into the backstory of LeBay and how he could potentially have this ability, even after death, to take somebody like Arnie over. And Arnie starts like talking like him and saying shitter all the time and stuff like that. And he starts wearing a back brace like him. And the transformation as described by Dennis is really creepy. There's even a scene where he goes and he's signing Dennis's cast, and he had signed it once a few months before when he had first got into the hospital, and then he signs it a few months later when he's about to get out, and the signatures are totally different. In fact, the second signature matches the signature, or at least the style of writing, on the deed to the car that Arnie got when he first bought Christine. So the transformation is pretty much, it's spelled out for us. There's really no doubt. And so, the slow pacing, it still kind of continues, though. Even after we roared, we revved and roared, we were motorvating, I guess you could say. That's a term that comes up a lot in the book. We were motorvating pretty damn good in part 2, the Teenage Love Songs. Only at the beginning of Teenage Death Songs to kind of back off, And King, bless your heart, you give us so many inconsequential details about characters sometimes, like the fact that we find out Dennis's father likes to make toys. We go on for like 5 or 10 pages about the fact that he's a toy maker, and that's his hobby, and he gave up his dream to, put bread on the table. It's not really stuff that we need. And that's something King regularly is notorious for, is just going very deep into this stuff and, just these inconsequential details. And you learn so much more about all of these regular and supporting characters, both Dennis and Arnie's, parents and, Dennis's sister and stuff. So we learn a ton more about Darnell, the guy who owns the garage where all of these repairs for Christine go down. But it does pick up, near the end where LeBay has essentially taken possession of Arnie by this time, and yeah, I mean, it still builds to an interesting climax, I guess, and which was accurately depicted in the film, which is where, they get this big bulldozer type thing, and they lure Christine over to, after talking mad smack to LeBay, basically, as he's fully taken over Arnie pretty much at this point. They taunt and chastise him into bringing Christine to the garage, and then they've got this huge bulldozer, like the size of a damn tank, and Lee almost gets it, all this other stuff, and there's a big difference in the way things go down with Arnie in the book at the end in comparison with the film. But yeah, there's the massive showdown, and Christine gets destroyed and everything, and yeah, that's that. I love the ending of the book though in comparison to the ending of the film though. So we find out that Christine is basically at the end of the book, she's killed everybody. She killed Arnie's father. She killed both Arnie and his mother in like a traffic accident, but it's not even told from the first person. We just like hear about it in like a report, and Arnie's dead just like that. It's not even like described in like that first person, somebody actually witnessing it, which I think is a real travesty to such an interesting character, especially with how transformative things were for him. It felt like a sellout. I did like the fate of Arnie a lot better in the film, and here in a few minutes we're going to talk about the film, y'all, because we have surpassed the 30-minute mark, and I don't want to go too crazy long, but the ending of this, where it fast forwards to a few years later, I think to 1983 if I'm not mistaken, so it fast forwards to what was present day, which is the perspective that Dennis has been telling his first and third part of the story from what was present day 1983. And he talks about how, we smashed Christine, down to this tiny little block and stuff. But even when they were getting rid of, just that compressed little just chunk of metal that used to be Christine, it makes you wonder if she was able to heal herself over and over. Like, how would she not be able to, even if she was crushed down into one of those little cube type things or something, And one of the guys who was disposing of the remains said that that he got bit by the remains. And so you're just like, wait a minute. This evil cannot be totally vanquished. And it basically ends with Dennis saying that, all these years later, I'm sitting and I was reading this thing in the AP, and they said that this guy named Scully or Sully or something like that, it was basically the only member of Buddy's gang to escape because he left the state and presumably had fled to Mexico or something like that. So yeah, Dennis sees on the news feed that apparently a car had run somebody down at this convenience store or something, and he immediately thinks, holy smokes, she's back, and she's going to come after Lee, who he doesn't end up with. He's going to come after me, or she's going to come after me. And it just basically ends with him just accepting the fact that he's pretty sure Christine is going to come after him still at some point. So he's always going to be looking over his shoulder. It's like that Tupac song. So I always got to keep my eyes on the payback or whatever, some fool that I dubbed way back. And I mean, yeah, that's essentially the mood that the novel ends with in comparison with, the film. And so I'm going to check the comments real quick before we do a brief little discussion about this film, because I'm positive that many more of you have seen Christine the movie in comparison with read this book that I just got done giving my thoughts on. And so I think that the reason I am okay. Am I not getting comments? Yeah, autoerotica. Right. Let's try this again, Lunchbox, because the feed has frozen on me. So let's see. You're offline. How am I offline? Oh, I hope I'm still streaming, guys. I hope that we haven't lost it. That would really stink, especially as I'm right in the midst of this. It says that it's still going. Let's see if I'm just having issues with the telephone now. So I'm gonna turn the Wi-Fizzle off. Jump back on here. So guys, if you have seen the movie Christine, which as I mentioned, I'm sure many more of you have, give me some thoughts here in the comments about what you think about the John Carpenter film Christine. It came out in December of 1983, and seriously, I know it's one that got a lot of acclaim at the time. The critics liked it. Time magazine, in fact, said that it was his best movie since Halloween. Blasphemy, in my opinion. Absolute blasphemy, if you ask me. That is just incredibly aggravating that they would even say something like that. But, you know, I mean, I can see why some people would really, in fact, dig this one. I don't know. Frustrating. So I honestly, upon a second watch, I think I appreciated a little bit more about it, you know, than I did initially. And that's because of the fact that having just reread the novel, even though it's the Cliff Notes, it's the condensed version, and it doesn't have the same trajectory of impact, you know, for the sheer fact that, you know, we don't have enough time to hear about all of those, you know, times, you know, in forts and building anthills and all this other stuff. All of the memories that Arnie and Dennis, you know, flash back to at certain points in this. I mean, it really builds the relationship so much more. And yes, there I am. I'm back on comments. Okay, or at least I think I am. All right. Yes. Tell us about how evil Buddy is. Yes. Oh, he's hella evil, man. Seriously. Sounds like Rob's radio every day. Yeah, for reals, man. Love these. Stephen King gives us soundtracks. Yeah, Stephen King is notorious for soundtracks, and that's actually one thing that he does that him and Carpenter in collaboration did very good in this movie. And I have to say, the film starts out with "Bad to the Bone" by George Thorogood. Honestly, one of my favorite songs of all time. And this is long before it was immortalized for me in Terminator 2. You know, it was used the year after it came out in 1983. That song had just come out in 82 by Thorogood, and it opens the movie up as you basically see the creation of Christine, which is not in the book, obviously. That's something that they did differently for this. The fact that stuff froze up, I really wanted to. The loss of identity, in his case to possession, is an interesting concept to explore, like the dual identity in Dark Hat. Exactly, Stephen G. That's one thing that is really intriguingly explored in this. It's definitely awesome. What kind of influence did a film like The Car have on this story or the movie? Unfortunately, I've never seen The Car. I've heard of it, Stephen, but I'm honestly, King is notorious for taking inspiration from other works and then just kind of twisting it around and making his own. I mean, for instance, Salem's Lot was basically his updated version in a lot of ways of Dracula, and he's been very on top of that about it. So yeah, let's see. Okay, Angela has seen the movie. Rob says, I've only ever seen it on TV a long time ago. And seriously, my phone just keeps freezing up like a mofo. This is so aggravating. Stephen G says, I enjoyed the film, but the absence of LeBay, as from the novel, was totally missed. Yeah, you never see LeBay in this, which is kind of lame. You meet his brother, though, who was played by the same guy who salts the sidewalks in Home Alone, which is funny. Angela was apparently 10 years old, then read the book, and it gave her nightmares. Por Dios, Fuego, Leroy Buchanan, what up? All the horrible things from the book I don't think happened in the movie. Yeah, most of the horrible stuff didn't, and that's where I said earlier that I was totally disappointed in just how tame, you know? The film was very tame, despite its R rating, at least for me. Once again, I mentioned earlier, they shift gears from Pennsylvania to Cali. That's kind of a bummer. Just the talk at the beginning about trying to get Arnie laid. I must admit, I didn't really like the actor, I should say. It's a dude by the name of John Stockwell that played Dennis. He was also in Top Gun, but he's gone on to be a director. He did stuff like Turistas and then crappy stuff like Into the Blue, I think, and things like that. But the actor who plays Arnie in this film, a guy by the name of Keith Gordon, he steals the film, in my opinion. The guy who plays Arnie does a hell of a job, a tremendous job, in fact, if you ask me. Just the way he does the Jekyll and Hyde, the transformation from just being the stumbly, bumbling, big Coke bottle glasses kid getting picked on to where his look starts changing, and his hair is being slicked back and he's not wearing the glasses and all this other stuff. Like his arc is very compellingly put into place. I mean, I give that guy so much credit. He's also a director now too. He directed 10 episodes of Dexter. He's directed episodes of The Strain, Legion, Homeland, Fargo. So he's actually become a very prominent television director. This actor who, really didn't do much else acting-wise. And he was in Jaws 2, I think, but I don't think it was like a big part or anything. So he's become quite the noteworthy director, despite this one iconic role of his. And so he makes the movie, in my opinion. He really, truly does. The chick from Baywatch, Alexandra Paul, who plays Lee, she's okay. She didn't really sell it to me, though. And I didn't really buy her chemistry with either of the two guys in the love triangle. It just really, I don't know, it just didn't work so well for me. But I mean, there's a terrific Carpenter score. I'll give it that. You know, when we're not listening to the rock and roll songs that we were talking about, I mean, he's got a very eerie, synthy type thing going on. And I mean, everything from when the football injury happens, when Dennis jumps up and he's catching the ball and like the synth sound just kind of cuts out and just the silence is all that you need as you see the slow-mo hit and everything. And also just the spooky synthy stuff, like when Christine, for instance, like one of the best scenes in the movie, even though it's not as it was in the book, is where Buddy is getting chased down by Christine after the gas station blows up and the whole car is on fire. So there was somebody in like some sort of heat protective suit, you know, with like gas mask and everything on, driving this car that is completely ablaze. And when it runs Buddy down, it's a creepy synth line that's going down when that transpires. But that is one of my big problems, once again, is that the body count is so much lower in this compared to in the novel, you know, and it's nowhere near as gruesome. That scene, very effective though. That's like the iconic Christine kill. I'd say that one, and then the one where Mooch is getting chased and he goes down, you know, the narrow alleyway and it's too big for Christine. And so what does she do? She just smushes herself and like you see the metal just crushing and everything. And so that's actually a pretty rad scene too. But those are really the only two iconic bits in there, aside from like the end confrontation with Petunia or whatever the hell they called that big bulldozer thing in the book. But I mean, the car regeneration effects, I would definitely have to make mention of that. Those were actually pretty badass. And you can kind of figure this is before CGI or anything like that. So what they did was they basically crushed the car, you know, and then they kind of just showed the film like in reverse. And so as opposed to, you know, seeing it crush, it looks like it's just starting crushed and then expanding. So, I mean, a very simple camera trick, but one that very smartly and effectively gets across the regenerative, you know, powers of Christine. What else? Anything else interesting to mention? I mean, is Christine being driven by Arnie? I guess that is one thing they do keep kind of vague, that you find out, you know, a decent way through the book that, you know, it's not Arnie and Christine. He'll be on like a chess tournament and Christine will drive around by herself and go run people over. Or, you know, he'll be basically doing other things and usually out of state so that there's an alibi so that you can't make a direct connection between the two. And it keeps Arnie off the hook. And it's why they could never truly, you know, go after him the way that the law enforcement people wanted to. But, you know, they keep it a mystery in the Carpenter film. You know, they always show like Christine's interior. It's like totally dark and black. So you can't really tell if there's a figure in there or not. And you don't really find out till near the end of the film whether Arnie is driving it or not, which I guess is kind of an interesting setup. I wrote here in my notes that I thought Lee is boring and Dennis is kind of a schmuck in this. And he kind of is, the actor that plays him. And I don't know how deliberate that was, but his character just didn't really do it for me. But there's two very interesting supporting players in this. I love Robert Prosky. He plays Darnell. It's sadly a pretty small part. Same with the guy who plays Junkins, who's the policeman who's investigating these murders, this string of murders, and suspecting Arnie and everything. It's Harry Dean Stanton, man. Rest peacefully. He is awesome in pretty much anything he does. And, you know, in the few scenes that he's in this, he's solid, man. He does a pretty damn good job. And so, I mean, there's a memorable bit here or there, but, I mean, I was more fascinated really with just some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I watched where they were talking about how they assembled like 24 of these different Plymouths and they just destroyed all of them in all of these different ways, from crushing them to the scene where Buddy and the guys are just bashing the shizzle out of her. And I mean, they ended up by the end of filming like tarnishing all of these these collectible vehicles and stuff. And I guess that's what, since they didn't have any big stars in this movie, you know, there was no A-list talent or anything. They said that the predominance of the money that they spent on the budget for this film, and it was a box office success, albeit a mild one, most of the budget went to restoring these old cars. Seriously, man, that's where a big chunk of the budget went, from what they were saying. And so, you know, I can't say I despise Christine, the movie, but it's, once again, it's on the tamer side, and I still feel like the concept when translated to screen is sillier than on the pages. You know, on the printed page, and just being able to use the imagination, and also the fact that, you know, the LeBay possession aspect, I feel like works a little bit better than Christine just being possessed for whatever reason, without very much explanation given to it. So, I mean, that's I guess about the extent of it. I wish I was having better luck with the comments here. I'm trying to see what I can. I can still remember in the process of reading. Okay, so Leroy Buchanan is in the process of reading Desperation. Yes, I hope that you enjoy that one. If you read Desperation, you have to read The Regulators, as my buddy Rubber Soul would say, because those are like sister. They're twinny books, you could basically say. Arnie was great in the movie. Yes, Mark Pearson, I'm glad that you agree. He was one of the absolute, that actor is really, those two scenes where Christine crushes herself and where she's on fire running over Buddy, and then the Carpenter score, those are really the only redeeming things for me in this film, because once again, I still think it's kind of cheese. Did you picture Buddy like the actor? I did not, Fuego, or his gang. Stephen King writes scary bullies. Does, and I do feel like, Angela, that they were going deliberately for campy in this. The villains felt campy to me. And because of the campiness, it wasn't that scary when the few of them got mowed down. It just didn't, I don't know. It wasn't really, it was like kind of NBD to me, no big deal. So Harry Dean Stanton, brilliant as the detective. Yes, Stephen, he definitely was. The killing of the airport manager guy was brutal in the book. Yeah, so many of the kills were super, super brutal in the book. I mean, I think of the one where, where Buddy is getting after the car accident and everything, and, his passengers are all dead, and he's, like, just crawling around, and Christine is, like, toying with him in the snow, and then LeBay's ghost, whatever, comes and is, like, taunting him, too, and it's just, I don't know. And once again, for those few scenes, I recommend Christine I don't know how much I can recommend Christine the movie, and some people love it, and if you're one of those that loves it, I say, hey, more power to you. I have a lot of friends that enjoy this movie, but I personally just don't. If you have seen the movie and you haven't read the book, though, and this is something I say on pretty much any time I do one of these retro reviews where I'm comparing a film and a book here on Hail to Stephen King, I definitely say, read the book, for God's sake, because if you like the movie, you will love the book, because the book in the Stephen King world is always going to be like the director's cut of a story. If you enjoy these characters, you're gonna get so much more about them. I mean, even the minor ones, like I said earlier. So if you enjoy Christine the movie even a little bit, please read the book, because once again, it's a sad book about just loss of innocence and friendship and growing up, really at the core of it, and Christine being the wedge that goes between, well, first it's Christine and then it's Lee, so it's kind of crazy, about how, friends drift apart depending upon the circumstance and whatnot. And so, yeah, that pretty much is going to sum it up for us here, guys. Yeah, we've been going for almost 50 minutes at this point, so I got to extend a grande gracias for everybody who tuned in to see this live, and for anyone who is watching this after the fact. You are appreciated, as Pop would say. I have been Jaime and Fuego. I host Hail to Stephen King here on The Horror Show every terrifying Tuesday, every scarific Saturday. Stay tuned for next month, because I'm going to be introducing the next Stephen King book club, which is going to be for May. And I have it narrowed down to 2 different selections. Would you guys like me to be more active, just hammering it in your face on my social media, like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, where you can actually see more of updates as I'm rereading, as we're reading these books hopefully together? Like, would you like a little, maybe 1 minute every week or every few days, where I'm like, hey, these are the chapters that I've read, these are just some brief thoughts about them. What do you guys think? Should we make it more interactive to that degree? If you think so, I'm definitely down. I just don't want to barrage my social media with all the stuff that all of these other people just who aren't in this book club of sorts interested in. Excuse me. Almost 50 minutes of talking. I didn't have a beverage or anything this whole time. My throat is dry. So, yes, once again, I've been Jaime and Fuego, y'all. You can find me on all social media sectors: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I'm actually doing my first Fuegotainment in quite a while tomorrow with Cecil Laird, because we are going to be doing a lengthy spoilers discussion with Luis Hernandez, all about Avengers Infinity War. Woo! So much to discuss there, but this is the horror show. So if you guys didn't hit the like button here, I urge and beg you all to, porfa y gracias. It is so greatly appreciated. And if you haven't subscribed to the horror show, please do that. If you share the video, do it with the hashtag Hail to Stephen King, just like you see in the title here of the video. Ring the bell here so that you always get updates about new episodes of Hail to Stephen King every Tuesday and Saturday evening, and also all the other stuff we do here on the horror show. We like to consider ourselves the most prolific horror channel on YouTube. 2 to 3 episodes every single day, 7 days a week. Reviews, trailer reactions, convention coverage, video game let's plays, and stuff here like Hail to Stephen King. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, cinemigos, and constant viewers, haha. And until we get to meet again on Tuesday, everybody, remember, stay scared. And read Stephen King. Yeah, read Christine. Do it. Do it now. Motivate, y'all. Thanks, everybody. Y'all are awesome. And yes, I look forward to seeing all of you on Tuesday. So until then, y'all, it's abadi. That's all, folks.